All right, so yeah, you have to deal with me writing on the old board and erasing in this. These boards don't erase very well. So if you're somebody who needs it completely erased, this will reinforce your ability to handle things that are a little bit out of context, right? You better handle things better. Why is it still? Does anyone have a $1,000 light bulb on them?
Oh yeah, let me just.
You do? You left it in the gym.
Yes.
They're like printers. All right, I got to talk to Shane too. Okay, so I went through the massive government aid for business right on the last thing. Then we get through, the new immigration. Where was the place on New York? Where's the place in New York where millions of immigrants came through? Yeah, Ellis Island. I highly recommend going there. It's really cool. And in the short run, what do immigrants do to wages in the short run? It drops, not completely, but in the long run, what does it do? Yeah, the market, more sale. Actually, it raises wages in the long run, but in the short run, it lowers it. And now that means if immigrants that are coming here with a legal process to become a citizenship or legal residence. Immigrants that are undocumented, and one of the reasons why companies like them so much, they perpetually lower wages because they can cut their wages. They can't resist. Yeah.
How short is short term? How long is?
Short term is shorter than long term. No, it can be very fast. It can be very fast or very slow, depending on where the concentration of immigrants go. And so you're going to see the element of like in New York City where wages would actually go up because of immigration, but in certain areas of New York, because it's so big, it actually drops wages. So you have a combination of both going on. So it's really, the time varies on the flexibility of the economy. And today, it could be much faster because the economy grows faster. And, did we get to tariffs? Did we get to tariffs about government policy? Okay, so let's do tariffs very quickly. Last part about government policy. They wanted a protective tariff. This pin is horrible. So this is part of government laissez-faire. This is laissez-faire economics. Oh, by the way, what do we call laissez-faire economics eventually by the end of the decade? What kind of economics? Yeah, this is conservative economics. And then in the 1920s, they come up with the term trickle down. It's still the basic element of conservative economics to this day. Yeah. We didn't get the tariffs? Let's not do tariffs then. Oh, what do tariffs do to prices? Yeah, it raises all prices. Now, this can keep up foreign competition, but if you have no competition, wow, can you profit? So tariffs can be a way to make more money. So where do we quit then? Oh, the KK. Okay, so let's not do tariffs. I'm leaving that up there though, because I like it. All right, so let's go ahead then and get to, we're going to jump right into, we did 9 factors. Let's do number 10. And number 10, a major factor of business growth, especially because of the massive competition, would be efficiency. Efficiency. Whew. Sorry, the pen really stinks. I'm really mad. I'm really sad. Mad and sad. Did I forget something? Now, efficiency means this. Here's the deal. The number one goal of a company, if anyone gets in business, they have one purpose and one purpose only. And I think we know exactly what that is. Profit. Make money. Make money as quickly as possible. Profit. They want profit to go up. How do you get profit to go up? I mean, this is always the issue with companies. Ideally, you want a situation where you have You can make or do anything and make products. People will buy it. They have to come to you for it, so you can charge whatever price you want and always make money. But in a free market competition, which capitalism at least kind of was. I'm gonna try a purple pen. I don't like brown. I'm tired of brown. That's a pink. Is that okay? Purple? Should we try it? Should we do it? So, profit to go up. How do you get profit to go up? Now, here's the thing. Everybody then who gets in business, the easiest way to get profit to go up is if you get more people to buy your products and buy your products at the highest price possible. But if you raise your price, what do your competitors do? Yeah, an undercut. And even if you put a superior product out, it takes a while for people to know what's a good product and what's not, and therefore undercut you. And so the only way to guarantee profit is to cut costs. Cut costs. The more aggressively a company can cut costs, the more they can drop their prices and still make profit. Now, don't forget, everybody's trying to cut costs at the same time. And so what everybody does is, we're trying lots of different colors today. I don't know if I like purple either. So what everybody tries to do in the short run is, if they try to cut costs aggressively at the same time, what they want to do is increase productivity. Increase productivity. That's the amount that a worker produces in a day or an hour. It's not how hard they work. It's just how much product you get per worker per day. And the more you can get per worker per day, the more profit you get. Now, this is part of the reason why the Industrial Revolution and capitalism took off. Capital are the machines, and therefore can replace workers and get more production per worker. I mean, that is the big gain why people buy machines. If they can afford it, they get more per worker. The problem is that's what all your competitors have already done. Now what? You still have the machines. Oh, sure, you might be able to innovate and get a better machine, but they're doing the same thing. And so it's a really difficult problem. And so what everybody tries to do is come up with ways to get more work per worker. So if you pay them the same and they do more profit. And one of the big things companies did aggressively was standardization. Standardization. Now, what was standardization? A really good example would be, or a classic one would be the time zones. The railroads were having a very difficult time scheduling trains, especially if they got bigger, and so they just came up with the time zones. So everybody in a certain area had the same noon, instead of each individual city having a different noon. How do you schedule railroads when everybody has a different noon? Because when is noon? When the sun's directly over your head. So Helena has a different noon than Seattle, technically. So what did they do? They made time zones, and it gives you an idea of the power of the railroads. We all just accept it. Now it just seems like normal. Of course we have time zones. The railroads just did it to make scheduling more efficient. A little bit more efficiency, that could be 2 or 3 more trains a day on one line, and therefore more profit. Another thing they would do, a really big one, was rail gauges. The rail gauge is the distance between the rails. Every railroad had just made their own rail gauges for whatever reason it might be. But what that meant is then every railway car has to be made unique for that railroad. But if everybody has the same rail gauge, that means you can mass produce one size of boxcar, one size of engine, because all the wheels are exactly the same width. And therefore becomes much more efficient and cuts costs dramatically. Something as simple as that can revolutionize railroads. And therefore, you can have situations where railroads can rent cars from other people. You ever been having the joy of watching one of those mile-long trains go through and sitting there waiting? And even though we have a monopoly of railroads in Helena, in Montana, Burlington, Northern, Santa Fe. a massive railroad corporation monopoly. But you might see Union Pacific cars on it. You might see Norfolk and Southern, I'm sorry. You might see Conrail, I'm just giving you other rail. Might occasionally even the Canadian Pacific Railroad cars might be on them. Because now you can just switch cars easily, it's much more efficient, it saves money. Another one were weights and measurements. Weights and measurement, W and E. Did I say W and E? That's how I spell measurements with an E. Just E. Weights and measurements. They standardize pounds, inches, miles. They kind of have it standardized, but once you standardize pounds, well then that it dramatically increases efficiency. A typewriter was an advantage of standardization. And that also would standardize the language, and standardize learning, many number of ways, but this cut cost. But even then, everyone's doing it too. Another way then is to become more efficient on the factory floor. Frederick Taylor would have great influence on I have no idea. Power Life X27, which is the best one. Yeah.
X27.
I've never looked at this model before. Thank you for coming in. Thank you for coming in.
All these questions, and I was like, oh, answers.
Was that exciting? Run the school. Actually, his idea would become Taylorism. Taylorism, they would add an ism, and everybody would follow his model to become more efficient. So to become more efficient on the factory floor, to try to suck as much productivity out of each worker. Yeah.
No,
Good. Done talking to yourself. And you answered.
Yeah.
I do. Okay, so Taylorism. So they did everything from just watching on the factory floor and watching how each worker worked and try to come up with more efficient ways to work to the lesson movements that were not towards production, and to become firmer on like when to take lunch breaks and et cetera to maximize productivity. All these ideas would come out of Taylor. Even when he even got one of Edison's first motion picture cameras and film workers with the idea that every worker would be working at the same exact motions. And the whole idea was that labor would become something he would dub, and it's still used today, and it gives me the creeps, human capital. So the labor would become like human machines. And that one goal, to suck as much money out of each worker as possible. So we have them all working, more productivity and not wasting time. That is Taylorism. And this idea goes on to this day, where they have things like on people's works with like computers. If your eyes shift away, you'll get docked. Amazon Workplace. If you are not moving at a certain speed, they will ding you. If you spend too long in the bathroom, they will ding you. They record if you go to the bathroom. All these kind of things that maximize efficiency. And it also makes the workplace really kind of hell for the workers. Hell. But they're also implying human capital, like the humans are now the machines. And they should remind you of something. What was that system called in slavery, where they would set the amount of production, that quota and or pushing that quota system? And that's kind of what it does now for laborers. They're getting a wage. Sure, they are not slaves, but at the same time. And so Taylor would come up things like it would, from his work, that would come the assembly line. We'll get to that in 1 second. But he also came up with, as companies get bigger and bigger and bigger, how do you organize a company like this? So you ever seen this chart where you have like a box and then more squares? so on like that. I was having trouble drawing squares there. But as you've seen this chart before, this organization chart, that's Taylor. I know looking at it, I'm like, oh, that's so obvious. But this is for big companies. And as corporations got bigger and bigger, corporations are rarely run by the people who own it. They pick somebody to run it. It's a job. They're paid. Who is somebody who runs a corporation? What do they call it? This comes from Taylor. Anyone know? I heard CEO, the chief executive officer. That's not the owner of the company per se. Oh, they might get paid in stock and they might actually be a stockholder, whatever. But a chief executive officer is paid by the shareholders to run the company. And he came up with this whole system to organize and manage big companies. And it's not designed to give people jobs so they have jobs and have money to pay for their family and provide shelter. No, it's to squeeze as much profit as possible per worker. And every companies would go to more extreme, but you can imagine the big deal with this. Once companies got more efficient, they could outcompete their competitors. If they can outcompete their competitors, what do their competitors have to do? Do the same stuff for costs. And so Taylorism would lead directly to Henry Ford is given credit that's not quite true, but he would perfect this in a lot of ways, make it really profitable in the short run. What did he do from production to get the maximum amount of work from each worker? That assembly line. Now there were assembly lines before, but Henry Ford did it with the production of automobiles, now standardized, making one type of vehicle. And so all the worker had to do is the same motion, turn the same bolt over and over again. And the car would go down a belt and the worker would not have to move, so there's no wasted motion. And they would work, work, work. And how do you increase production? Just move the belt a little bit faster each time. A little bit faster, a little bit faster. And you increase productivity. And you don't have to do you don't have to do a lot at one time. Just a little bit faster, a little bit faster, a little bit faster. And that's the way production will get more out of each worker, more efficiency. And what happens to costs? Costs drop. And every company that can't afford this is driven out. And what type of companies can afford this? What do you call it? The bigger, we're getting to corporations. What is called the bigger you are? This is economies of scale. Economies of scale. They have a competitive advantage. And once they have it, and can drive competitors out, it's hard to get that advantage going. The American car companies are kind of notorious for now being poorly managed. They're so big. They're there. What are you going to do? Now, poorly managed, there's lots of reasons for it. And it doesn't mean they don't produce quality products. That's another story. But they just have a lot of managerial problems. But they're so big, no one can shoot. Even though, believe me, go home and start building cars. Should we do that? Should we just bag all this and just start a car company?
Along with our moat?
Yeah, well, we dig a moat first. I don't want people stealing our ideas.
Well, the moat is we're going to build this cars.
Bingo. So, 11. What we have then is economies of scale. It's big. This will become the beginnings of the era of big business. Big has a competitive advantage. And everybody is in cutthroat competition. Trying to find ways to compete. Everybody's trying to cut costs. Everybody's trying to innovate. Now, they can make poor quality stuff too. The problem with poor quality stuff is what will happen potentially. People will finally quit buying. Now, has it worked where somebody has made poor quality stuff and rolled the die hoping people would take advantage of the low prices, and by the time they realize they're paying for shoddy material, it's too late? Huh? Apple and Microsoft has that. The best example would be Walmart. Walmart, not everything is shoddy, but yeah. And it doesn't mean that. But Microsoft they started putting out, it wasn't as good as Apple, then Apple, yeah, you find that stuff in. Kind of find that in all the big companies, but that's another story. That's also monopolies. So everybody's trying to get big. The problem is this: risk. If you put up money to get bigger and go out of business, what happens to you? And if you borrow money, who has to pay back that debt? If you start a business, you borrowed money, the company goes out of business, the debt's still there. Who has to pay it back? Yeah, that's a lot of risk. And it's really scary. And the way that laws are done, if you start a business and for a license, partnerships are the same thing. You are personally liable for the liabilities of that company. All the liabilities of that company. You personally own that company, including if the company commits a crime. You committed a crime. And so that's a lot of risk. If you got a family member, which I bet almost all of you have, or somebody close to you started a business, you probably witnessed how frightening that risk is. And so, if you get bigger, more risk. How do you limit the risk? How do you get bigger? Okay, but to get rid of the competition, you gotta get bigger. Huh? Get a lot of people to invest. What do they call those companies like the London Company of Virginia that came over to start Virginia, Jamestown colonies? Joint stock companies. Did you say that too? Yeah. Joint stock companies, great. And now there have been these investor-owned companies before, and they would have a name, but the legal entity would not be created until 1830. In what country? It's not the United States. Belgium, of course. I know you were all thinking who's thinking Belgium? Everybody, right? Belgium was a brand new country, and they want to encourage foreign investors to invest in the Industrial Revolution in Belgium. All right. What do we call this thing? The corporation. Who owns the corporate? What do we call the people who own? Shareholders. Shareholders buy a piece of the corporation called a stock. Now, corporations are not natural. They do not grow in the wild. They were not mined. The gods, Zeus on Olympus did not create corporations. Who created corporations? The Belgians, yes, the Belgians. This is a legal entity. It's an entity. It's created by laws. Who creates laws? In a way, who creates laws? Lawmakers, aka government. Do you remember when I first started talking about government and laissez-faire? What are big businesses doing by this time? Huh? Well, the term lobbying wasn't used quite yet. We're on the edge of the term lobbying. But they are using their money to pay for politicians. Representative democracy was brand new, and that got their influence. They want rules to be made. Rules on things like legal entities called corporations. There's reasons companies do corporations, and it's huge. I should add, since you mentioned lobbying, I want to tell you where the term lobbying comes from. If I say somebody is lobbying Congress, you know what I mean. Trying to influence members of Congress. Well, Ulysses S. Grant, when he was president, would get really tired of being in the White House because all these people would show up every day to knock on the door of the White House and ask for him to support laws. So he would escape by going to the lobby of the Willard Hotel, a very famous hotel in Washington, D.C., to basically smoke cigars and drink brandy and be alone. But soon people found out that he was in the lobby of the Willard Hotel, so it started to bother him, asking him for support on laws or whatever. And he would come back and say, those damn lobbyists in that lobby are still bugging me. And that's where the term lobbying comes from. Ulysses S. Grant trying to escape them and then dub them back. So it literally comes from the lobby of the Willard. Still there. Go to the will, or they have like a big fishbowl. Moving on. Back to legal entity. So this is created by members of Congress. This is created by laws or state assemblies. So you can imagine that people who want corporations and benefits for corporations are going to give politicians a lot of money to get what they want. By the way, have they gotten what they wanted? Oh, God, have they gotten what they wanted? Wow. Corporations are pretty shocked. So back to this. A legal entity. What is the advantage of this? Well, Belgium, to encourage investors, said corporations will have what's called limited liability. Have you ever seen a name of a company and they'll have LLC on it? That means limited liability corporation. So what does limited liability mean? It means that the shareholders are only liable for the value of the stock they buy. So if you buy 100 shares of stock in Partridge Incorporated, and I would highly encourage you to invest in this. We're going places. You can count on me. And Partridge Incorporated goes out of business. How much are you out? Yeah, how much you invested in? $100. Let's say Partridge Incorporated borrowed billions of dollars to make Partridge work. It's my big factory. I borrowed billions. Who's liable for that debt? It doesn't disappear. But the debt doesn't, you're on the right track. If you, each of you invested $100 in Partridge Incorporated, Partridge Incorporated goes out of business. You're only out the value of your share, $100. No, not necessarily. Who's liable for the $1 billion of debt? I should add, I was working so hard, so I gave myself a raise for running Partridge Incorporated of $1 billion. Who would have known that we'd go out of business? Who's liable for that debt? No. Well, in a way. The corporation. The entity is liable for the debt. So that's where you get the lender. The entity is liable. Let's say Partridge Incorporated, in the process of doing this, committed lots of crimes. No one told me the law. I did lots of things wrong. Who's liable for those crimes? The entity. Now let me give you another example. This is a thought experiment. Let's say I was walking down the street with a hammer. And I walked to the people and started beating them over the head with a hammer. What's going to happen to me? Well, let's say not Partridge Incorporated. Jay Partridge just walked down the street with a hammer and just started beating people with a hammer, and hopefully he'd be arrested. I will be arrested. Well, let's say Partridge Incorporated was involved in business practices that killed people. Who is liable for that crime? The entity. Do you see the advantage of a corporation now? Isn't it amazing? So, I'll give you an example. Oil prices started going up in the 1970s. There was a movement to make cheaper cars that had better gas mileage. And the American car companies didn't want to do it. They didn't want to change their production. So Ford slapped together this thing called the Pinto. And the Pinto was just hacking. Anyone ever heard of the Pinto? I mean, they were just ugly, cheaply made things, but supposed to have better gas mileage. But they were so poorly engineered that you put gas in the gas tank, it went down a pipe that made a 90-degree turn into the gas tank. And it was right behind the rear bumper. And if they were rear-ended, that pipe would break and the car would explode and everybody inside would be burned alive. That happened to hundreds of people. Did Ford know they had this problem? Oh yeah, they knew it right away. We now have documents they knew before they ever started producing it. But they did anyways because they'd gone through the production, they made the price. Who was ever arrested for murdering millions of people that they knew they were going to kill? They paid a few lawsuits, you know, it's price of doing business. Limited liability allowed them to get away with it. In the vermiculite mines in Libya, they killed thousands with asbestosis in Libya. Vermiculite's that's in Libya. It's an asbestos insulation, and all it takes is breathing in just a little bit of that, and the workers would come home with little bits of vermiculite, asbestos on their clothing, and their entire family would breathe in a little bit and have this horrible. Asbestosis is a horrible lung cancer, just a nightmare. And the company, Union Carbide, who did that, what happened to them? They gave out some money, you know, to shut people up. No. Yeah, Libby used to be a double-A school, I'm sure. It's just weird to think about. Now I think it's B. Barely, yeah.
Well, basically, because they refuse to be reevaluated, they're not truly qualified to see. Like, they're barely.
I think there's a lot of schools out there, I'm not C. But the point is, that's limited liability. I'm giving you the most extreme example. So everyone got that liability? Well, let's go through the other advantages of this. First off, the biggest advantage right here, it spreads the risk out. So if money is lost, one investor won't lose everything. And so it spreads the loss out. Could there be other advantages to it? Why, yes, there could be. So it spreads the risk out. The next one is really important. It allows you to get bigger. If you spread the risk out, the corporations have an advantage. And think about it for a second. I mean, think about how successful corporations have been. I mean, how many in here right now, look down to your clothes, are wearing, you paid for advertisements for a corporation? It's kind of amazing. I should add Notre Dame is a corporation, so you pay for that. North Face. State colleges are a little bit more complex. Not as many as other periods. Hey, it's hard to avoid it though, right? It's hard to avoid it. What's on your shirt? You just found the shirt? All right, so let's get back to this. Next. The next big advantage of corporations is this. Not just bigger, but if you're dealing, it's not your money, it's somebody else's money, what would that encourage you to do? Yeah, take more innovation, take more chances. It allows for more risk, potentially more innovation. If you're risking your own money, you might be really scared to take that technological advancement. But if it's other people's money, yeah, why not? There's a reason why corporations, if they're competing with each other, lead to more innovation. Another big thing is this. It also allows for massive tax advantages. Who's liable for the taxes? The corporation. Heck, you can play all kinds of games with that. Of course, the U.S. corporations don't pay any taxes anymore because they've rigged the rules, but it's kind of amazing what you can do. There's reason why everybody with wealth has a corporation. Every farm almost today, any size at all is a corporation. That is why some people have multiple corporations. Elon Musk has something like 40 corporations. There's smaller corporations, they literally call small corporations S corporations. Next, what else does it allow you to do? You remember I gave you a hint on that. I am the CEO of Partridge Incorporated. You each gave me $100, and then I borrowed $1 billion to build my massive factories. And we're going to get so rich. We're going to get so rich. We're going to be making money. Well, I sound almost like a crypto guy. We'll be getting so rich, and we'll be making something that nobody wants or can ever use. Wow, go with me. What can I do? Yeah.
Just push the risk of losing the money because you're only losing as much as you invested.
Yeah.
While still increasing the ability and margin of profit.
And so that allows for massive payouts. Massive payouts. You're exactly right. They gave myself a raise of $1 billion a year because I'm doing such a good job. That's exactly what happened to the Northern Pacific Railroad. That took all the money from the railroads, the land, and they just paid themselves a huge amount of money and went bankrupt. They went in receivership. That's what they call bankrupt 7 times. I mean, it's hard to find a corporation that doesn't do it. I mean, my God, they all do it. That was so close. But you can pay yourself out more money. And if it goes bankrupt, you still get your money. And last thing, it encourages more debt. Why not borrow more money? Who's liable for the debt? Borrow more. And so this is going to lead to a whole new type of banking. The financial system is going to explode in the late 19th century. A new kind of finance that's specifically designed for corporations. It's a kind of bank. Now, if you go to a bank, so let's say you go to the bank down the street, you go to Stockman's or Valley Bank, one of those banks, and you put your savings account in and try to get a car loan. That's called a commercial bank. And don't think too much of commercial implies business. That's what it's called, a commercial bank. And that's where you have your savings account. What do you call a bank that deals with corporations and helping corporations set up? What is that called? Big investment bank. And who was the guy who really jumped on this, realizing it's a heck of a lot harder to start a company than to be the guy who loaned them the money and wrote the purse strings? Who was the investment banker? J.P. Morgan. J.P. Morgan realized it might be easier to make money in finance than actually making stuff. Because corporations constantly need money. If you're going to start a corporation, almost nobody has that skills or the time to actually do it. They go to investment bank and help set it up. They take fees on that. And you might wonder, why would an investment bank loan money to corporations? Well, first off, they can charge higher interest rates for risky ones. They get their money, but there's another thing. Banks are what kind of companies? They're corporations. They're corporations too. If I work at a bank as a loan officer and I'm loaning to big corporations, if I loan money to a corporation, what do I get in return? I get paid. I get paid per loan. And if they don't pay it back, I still got paid. Who lost money? The entity called the corporation. And so have you ever seen this thing like in bad movies where somebody makes a horrifically ruthless decision and they say, that's just business? That's what this is. Everybody can say, all my horrific decisions, I'm not doing it, it's the entity. The entity's doing it. The entity's killing nearly 200 railroad workers a week because they don't care. Because of the unsafe working conditions by the 1890s. Why? Business. Yeah.
Where did the debt go? Because you talked about how all the Cutthroat corporations are really, and you said that like if they fail bond, where does all the debt go? Because fails have debt.
Yes, I want to.
So what happens is this. We'll do a real simple thing. You ask about debt. So let's say Banker Loan Partners Incorporated. I couldn't pay it back. And so whatever the collateral was, the bank gets. So they can maybe scout through the assets of Partridge Incorporated and get that money back. But they will probably have to lose it. And so if that happens to enough banks, they go out of business. Last thing we'll write down for the day then. So this is why soon this entity that has nothing to do but create money will soon be called the beast. And you're going to see this in cartoons of this beast with many tentacles. So Shiba's like an octopus, almost always, like Standard Oil. Huh? Or maybe what represents tyranny? There we go. All right. My handwriting's really good. That's,
What's the difference between like commercial banks and investment banks?
commercial bank does banks to individual customers. And so a commercial bank are the ones who will like, you would go borrow money to take a loan out to buy a car or a home loan.
Investment banks are like for corporations.
It's for corporations and bigger business, yes. So like the biggest investment bank in the United States, well, that's kind of hard to say now because they now allow those to combine. I think that Goldman Sachs. Like what kind of bank? Glacier Bank is normally a commercial bank, but because of some deregulation, they do a little bit of investment banking too. And that's actually really, really risky. So if they invest, they gamble in corporations and they go out of business, that's going to happen to the Great Depression. Oh, before you go, one thing I got to tell you. You have to get out of your head that corporations are like a business with just one person owns it. Because that's not the way corporations are. They're an entity. And on that note, I'm shutting down. Goodbye, everybody!
I was like, oh, that is like, all right, let's go.